Welcome back, everybody. Monday morning. Hopefully this week goes better than last week. On my way down to delivery, I showed you the box truck earlier in this video that I picked up. Turned into a pretty big event. You know, we were concerned. I said early in the video that we were concerned about the dimensions of the box, and it turned out that the dimensions weren't the biggest issue or weren't the biggest concern. When I took measurements on that truck sitting there on the ground, it measured out at 30 foot 10 inches long and 11 foot 8 inches tall. Obviously it's legal width, has to be in order to drive down the road. So those were the two dimensions we were concerned about. Turns out that both of them will work on my trailer. Wasn't a huge concern. So, however, as it turned out, the biggest concern ended up being the fact that the air compressor didn't want to build air, and we had no way of getting that thing on the trailer. Without the air compressor building air and without it working mechanically, it won't go into drive. So even if I was to disconnect my airline and connect it to the tanks and force air into the system, which you can do, perfectly acceptable, pretty simple actually, wouldn't have mattered because without the air compressor running properly, from what I understand, it just won't go into drive. So that it wouldn't have helped us. So we ended up getting the wrecker, you saw that, getting it put on. Now we're headed down. I'll be down at delivery here in about a half hour or so. We'll get this thing taken off. But the one thing I wanted to talk about with it that I think is relevant to the channel is that 11 foot 8 inches tall that I measured sitting on the ground. That truck had been sitting there on their property for roughly a week and a half or 2 weeks, and nobody had touched it. Clearly it lost air because the air compressor had no air and it wasn't working. So I measured it on the ground, and I think it was 11.7 and a half. I called it 11.8. I always do pad it a little bit to be sure. So I called it 11.8. That's what I measured on the ground. Then the tow truck got there, and he ended up connecting to the air tank to release the brakes in the bank, doing exactly what we would have done. He connected right to the air tanks, forced air into the system. I believe it was the air dryer he connected to. Forced air into the system, got the rear brakes to release so that he could tow it. Puts it up on the trailer, disconnects his line, puts fitting back in. I get everything chained down. I chain off the axles. I don't generally chain off the body on these chassis, so I chain off the axle. Get hooked back up to it, put air to my system so everything's, fully aired up. And I put the measuring pole on it, and it's sitting at like 13.8. Well, the math doesn't work there. If it's 11.8 on the ground and my trailer is 22 inches, then it should be 13.6. So I was really kind of racking my brain trying to figure out what in the heck was going on and why that thing was 2 inches taller. And I ended up taking a couple extra chains, grabbing hold of the frame just beneath the box and ratcheting down on those and pulling down on that suspension to the 1.5 to 2 inches that I needed to get me down to legal. So I'm on my way home Friday, and I'm talking with another driver, and through the discussion I'm telling him, hey, I don't understand why this math didn't work for me. Like, it's kind of weird, this situation. And he said, and Dave said, you sure with the air was all the way out of the system? And I said, you know what? No, I'm not sure. So through the conversation with Dave and I, we decided that when I got a chance, I would go ahead and let the air out of the tanks and see what happens. And I would know immediately if I let the air out of the tanks and that suspension starts to drop down a little bit, I'm going to know because those chains that I put on are going to loosen up, pulling down on them pretty hard. So turns out that Mr. Earhart, kudos to Mr. Dave Earhart, he was 100% correct, and there was air still in that system. So as soon as I opened up them valves on the tanks, let all the air out of the tanks, it took all the air out of the suspension, and it brought that thing down, and sure, just loosened up my chains on that back. Took the measuring pole back out, took another measurement, and I was actually like 13.5 and a half. So this is why I thought this was relevant to the channel. Some dimensions, if it's not right, or if it's not what you think it is, or your math isn't working on it, or what it should be, start thinking outside the box on what it could possibly be. I don't know why I didn't think about the air in that suspension, but I talked about, in one of the early episodes, I talked about having resources available to you for permit issues or chaining, securing, whatever. And this is just one of them things that, even though it was something that I should have known and I should have thought of, it just slipped my brain. So it's good to have a pool of people that are as knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than you, and sometimes less knowledgeable. Sometimes, you know, it doesn't really matter. 2 brains is better than 1. So it's good to have resources available to you that can throw something at you might not have thought of, because I absolutely should have thought of that, and I didn't. And when Dave said it, I thought, you know, that makes 100% sense, and he turned out to be right. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this morning. Almost down here to delivery. Hopefully I'll get some footage at delivery. We'll see. We're talking about craning this truck off. When we get there, we're going to back it in a bay and just pick it up with the crane and take it off that way. Hopefully whatever problem this truck's having is pretty simple. They can get it fixed and get it right back out to the customer. So stay tuned. Should be an interesting unload. All right, so here we are at delivery, and this dang thing, after all that work Friday or Thursday evening, this dang thing decided to work. So here we go. Let's see if we can take it off. You're about to drop down, Bobby. You're down. Go gentle, that bumper's gonna hit. You're good. Well, that made that really easy. Why couldn't it just done that on Friday or Thursday? Oh, there you go. That worked out pretty good. Now, let's just hope these guys get something ready to ship. So as of right now, I have no load. See what happens.
18 pounding on the ground. I don't need to shoot bubble gum machine. Blue